So yeah, there's Rumi. He's a 13th century Muslim cleric. You've been signed out because your account is signed into another device. Do I need to worry about that? No. Okay. All right. I'm not super into his stuff, but you sometimes you read quotes. And so there's one Rumi quote. I mean, there's a few of them I've got sort of in my head, memorized. But the one I was thinking of is, yesterday I was clever, so I tried to change the world. Today I'm wise, so I'm changing myself. Yesterday I was clever. You have no idea. I haven't bothered to do a quote investigator and trace it back to the original Persian. He wrote primarily in Persian. And so I haven't bothered to really get a solid translation of it. He also sometimes wrote in other languages as well, but I think Persian was his main thing, which is not my thing. And so I'm not sure. I guess it was Farsi. If he didn't write in Persian, he would have written in Farsi. There's no such language as Persian. You are Persian, you write in Farsi, you speak in Farsi. Iran, not Iran. And so if you're from Iran, you are Persian and you speak Farsi. My bad, sorry about that. He wrote primarily in Farsi. And I think he also wrote sometimes in other languages as well. I think maybe he wrote some stuff in Greek too. He was quite learned. And he was a Sufi, but in addition to being a Sufi, he was a Hanafi Muslim cleric as well, which meant he was, schooled in Islamic jurisprudence, and he was a bit of a scholar as well as a poet. Anyway, he's generally famous for having a real universalist, wise, beyond the confines of his particular tradition, and he's just appreciated by Iranians generally aren't super appreciated in the rest of the Muslim world. And so the Shia Muslims generally aren't that appreciated in the Sunni world. But Rumi everybody loves him. And even in India, people like him and quote him. He's really well known. Even in the West, if you're cool, then you know a couple of Rumi quotes. Maybe you got like a Rumi tattoo on the back of your neck or something like that. So he made this statement that yesterday I was clever, smart, sharp, witty, and so I try to change the world. Today I'm wise, deep, thoughtful, pensive, introspective, and so I'm trying to change myself. Now, of course, yesterday doesn't mean yesterday, literally. It means in the past. And today means I've finally gotten to this higher level of realization. What's the higher level of realization? He has to change himself. It's not quite. You got to change yourself. It's not quite. There's a precursor to that. What's the higher level of realization? Yeah, you can't change the world. You can't change other people. We like to think, and that, of course, that leads to, well, then the only thing I can do is change myself. So it does lead to that. But there's a natural progression you got to go through. Then the child learn how to walk isn't quite true. First, the child learns how to crawl. Then they learn how to stand. Then they learn how to walk while holding on to something. Then they learn how to walk without holding on to something. Then they learn how to run. Then they learn how to jump. There's a progression a child goes through. And so if you ignore those steps and make it a little simplistic, that's okay. It's not wrong. But it demonstrates that you maybe are lacking something, like you don't quite get it all. So the precursor is, I realize I can't change other people. I guess theoretically you could change a bunch of people and then realize it didn't change you. And then realize that even if you do change other people, it doesn't change your existential reality. That is a theoretical possibility, but that's not the way it works. Because if you try to change other people, almost immediately when you try to change other people, you will meet with frustration and you will fail. In fact, even the ability to change other people largely depends on having some degree of realization that you can't change other people, but rather you may be able to persuade them or influence them or assist them or facilitate them. But even the idea that I'm going to change the world, that statement is so megalomaniacal and egocentric and childish, really, that it's pretty much guaranteed you're going to fail. Like the first day you try, and then every day thereafter. And people who have the capacity to change others, they don't really view it like that. They view it that I'm assisting or serving or facilitating, because there's some awareness that you can't really do it yourself. You're not going to fix somebody. Their free will is a basic constituent of their change, and no amount of expertise on your part will supersede their own need to want change, to choose change themselves, which involves them digging deep. You can't give that to them. Maybe you can let them borrow it for a minute, but ultimately they have to decide they want to change. You might wow somebody for a minute, but to really affect somebody's heart, they have to be sincere. You guys following this? So the way it really works is you have to go through this process of being foolish and then suffering and then realizing that that's not what it's all about. Does that make sense? You know, I was even thinking about the Beatles. You know, people were just, I was watching an interview, I was listening to an interview. I was reading a transcript of an interview, to be correct. Because that just takes too long to listen to something or watch something for me. So I just read transcripts. And if I can't get a transcript, I usually just skip it. George Harrison and the Beatles, they were so famous, it's almost like no one has ever been as famous as they were. Nor will anybody ever be as famous as they were. They were the most famous people in the whole world, universally. Everybody knew who they were. They were beyond a Michael Jackson, a Beyonce, a Taylor Swift. There's just no comparison. They were so universally loved and accepted. The Beatles were like, I mean, they said at one point, we're bigger than God. Bigger than Jesus, I think they said. They got criticized for that. But they didn't mean we're bigger than Jesus, like we're better than Jesus. They just meant that that's how popular we'd become. Almost like they were just marveling at how popular they'd become. And there was Beatlemania was like a phenomenon. You watch, you know, documentaries on it. It was crazy. People were like losing their minds by the millions. Anyway, George Harrison's wife bailed on him. And I think she had an affair with Eric Clapton, who was a better guitar player. Like, I mean, as famous as he was, that happened to him. And then John Lennon got assassinated. And Paul McCartney, by all accounts, is not a nice person. Although he's vegan, so I got to throw him some love for that. I think it must be his daughter, it must be Stella McCartney. She does a bunch of vegan stuff too, clothes and perfumes. So I don't imagine it's his wife. I'm imagining it's his kid. You guys heard of Stella McCartney? Kid? Nobody knows? Anyway. But yeah, everybody struggled with addiction. And so these people could almost like order people to jump off a cliff and they would do it. But if you look at their lives, they still, they suffered in all too typical ways. They couldn't even get together and get married and not get divorced. Like real low-level stuff, that your average villager should be able to navigate. They couldn't navigate that. And they struggle with addiction and cigarettes and, all sorts of vices that just really represent like a low level of evolution. And so, what to speak of everybody else? You change people, you might be able to force people or coerce people for a hot minute, but everybody's running their own thing, doing their own thing, and the beginning of wisdom is this realization that there are huge things about the world, including other people, that are not within your jurisdiction to control. It's a big realization. It's not just people you can't control. You also can't control the world. Earthquakes, old age, gravity. There's all sorts of forces in the world which are superior to us and act on us. And maybe you learn how to swim with them, but you don't control them, they control you. The easiest for almost anybody to appreciate is time. But there's any number of fundamental forces that govern reality, that we are subservient to. And so not only can we not control other people, we also can't control the world, largely our environment. We can respond to it and react to it and try to, get away from it, but it's in charge and we're moving somewhere else. We're chasing the endless summer. We're chasing good weather. You follow? It's not chasing us, we're chasing it. It's in charge, and we have to flex, and we have to move, and we have to pivot. You guys following this? So, Rumi's quote always struck me as being profound. Because it's a real, it's even like, it's so cliched, it's the whole AA thing. The change the things you can, accept the things you can't, and know the difference. It's like that's, Rumi said that 7 centuries before AA jumped on his bandwagon and co-opted the quote and reframed it. But it's as true now as it was then, and it's as cliched as it is. A lot of times cliches are just so good that everybody knows them. Just because something's cliche doesn't mean it's not profound. It just might be so obvious that once you say it, you can't unsee it. Do you guys follow that? So yeah, I think there's a lot of wisdom to this statement. And I think just a humble, honest assessment of our existential situation will lead somebody relatively quickly to realize that they can't change things or people. Sometimes you do A and then you get a great result, somebody changes, like you want to help somebody, they should become sober, they should chant or whatever it is, and it works. And then sometimes you do A with somebody else, exactly the same, and it doesn't work at all. And then you realize, oh, maybe it wasn't me. Maybe I did my part, but the other person was a factor in the equation, and they were really the deciding factor. I can deploy card A every time. And the reason why it works with some people and doesn't with others isn't because I'm deploying it better or worse. It's because they are a constituent factor in the equation that I can't control. Do you follow this? That attempt to change other people and the angst you feel when you're unsuccessful and your response to that angst of becoming detached and accepting what was always as true as time and gravity, that you can't control other people, that you can't change other people, that you can't change the world. It's the beginning of self-realization. Of course, it totally flies in the face of kind of popular materialism that, like, don't think that a small group of dedicated individuals can't change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. There's all, and we will overcome, and I am woman, hear me roar, and in a lot of ways, what I'm saying flies directly in the face of all activism. In that sense, it's totally disempowering. And it's like, it's anti-activism. I become a fatalist by believing this. I become a fatalist. And I become a determinist, a hard determinist. And I'm disempowered. And why even try? And it just makes you want to give up, and it almost leads to nihilism. Do you guys follow that? So how do you escape that? Because certainly, who wants to be a nihilist or a fatalist or a predeterminist and say everything's karma, and then there's no free will, and then why even try? And you might as well just give up. And look at all the great things activism's done. We got women the right to vote. We got civil rights. And what's wrong with you? You're just like, part of the problem because you're not willing to be part of the solution. And there's no such thing as being non-racist. You're either anti-racist or you're racist. You're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And such a disempowered, fatalistic worldview perpetuates all the injustices in the world that otherwise, if we get into it, we could change. How do you contend with that critique? Or maybe you don't, maybe you agree. Did you follow that? Did you follow the doubt? Did you understand the doubt I just expressed? Okay. Did you guys understand the doubt I just expressed? Let me say it again. If I say I can't change anybody, I can't change things, all I can do is change myself, then I'm accepting that I'm powerless to change other people. If I'm powerless to change other people, why should I even try? But if we look at the world, we see women fought for the right to vote, or we fought for equal rights, or whatever. And the world changed, and we got into it. And we got into social media, and we canceled that person, and the world changed. It was Me Too, and BLM, and civil rights, and the right to vote. And So many things. The right to choose. Somehow the choice question is about abortion. They coined the very word choice makes you think abortion. And so all these things were won by people being active and getting into it and trying to make a difference and change the world. But you, with your Rumi-esque idea that you can't change the world, become fatalistic, that things are just fate. Deterministic, that things are already predetermined. And then that makes you not even try. Did you get it that time? Were you spacing out, or did you actually not get it?
I was spaced out.
Yeah, it's not a good excuse, man. I don't want to have to repeat myself because you're spaced out. Nobody else was. Did you guys get it? I assumed you were sincere, but couldn't get it. If I'd known you were spaced out, I wouldn't have wasted my time. So do you have a response to that? You got one? Clean?
I mean, those movements aren't just an individual, they're masses of people.
Those movements aren't individual, they're mass of people. Okay, well, they would have started with a person or a small group of people and grown, and somebody at some point had to jump in and make a move, and then it's not that they waited till they had the numbers. They started before they had the numbers, and then that created a fomenting effect, and it created the movement that you're talking about. I'm not looking for people where I'm going to have to correct you, because I want to. So you either have the answer or you don't. If you think you might have the answer, you don't. If you know you have the answer, I'm still giving you 50-50 odds. But if you don't know you have the answer, don't even raise your hand. You know you have the answer? All right. Say it loud and proud.
There's a difference between being 100% powerful and being able to control everything and having influence. And so we can have influence on something and not be the only part of the equation.
It's not a bad answer. I don't agree with it. There's a difference between being omnipotent and being impotent. It exists on a continuum. And so if you're partially potent, then you can influence people. And so you can do that, but that doesn't mean you're all powerful. And so you're saying don't dichotomize it into all or nothing. See it on the continuum that it actually exists on. And then be influential to the extent you're able to, while at the same time acknowledging that you're not all powerful. Right? It seems like a great answer, doesn't it? Why would I disagree with such a good answer? Do you know why I'm disagreeing? Okay. All right. The reason why I'm disagreeing with that really good answer, smart, intelligent answer, that I'm creating a false dichotomy, which I was, or at least which I may have been. I don't think Rumi's quote is fight and struggle to change the world while at the same time acknowledging that you are not the only variable in the equation. That would be a good quote, but I don't think that was his quote. I think his quote was more systemic. That at some point you have to stop trying to change the world and just start changing yourself. I'm just in the middle of it, man. Come on. At some point, you have to stop trying to change the world, and you have to start looking within and changing yourself. And instead of trying to fix the material world and make a paradise on earth and making that what you're all about, the purpose of life is self-realization, is the great journey within. And at some point, you have to retire from trying to fix everything else. And you have to be satisfied working on yourself. And therefore, this is the argument for spirituality. Now, it may very well be that you have your dharma to help other people, and you view yourself as an instrument, and you in a detached way go out in the world and do what you're supposed to do. And if other people are benefited by that, you give credit to them for making the choice to be a part of that, and you were just out there doing your dharma, and you never really thought you were the controller. You were just controlling yourself, which means doing your dharma. And so it might look like I'm out trying to change the world. What I'm really doing is I am changing myself and doing what I can do, and I'm controlling myself, and I'm detached from what the results are. And that's like a very unpopular position, because the big myth of the material world is if we work hard enough and we get enough numbers, we will overcome. That's the big myth. Like Bernie Sanders is going to win 2024 or whatever it is. He's going to win. He just has to get that next one. You know, a revolution's coming. The worst campaign slogan in the history of U.S. politics. Because we're not like, you know, we're not doing some kind of communist revolution. Maybe in Cuba it would be good, you know. It's an unpopular position. But if we try too much to jump in on your bandwagon, then you're really a materialist. You're just a realistic materialist. But you're not a spiritualist yet. You haven't made that change. That the most important thing I can do is look within, is love God, is change myself. That's actually what I should be devoting the majority of my effort in my life to. And that spirituality is the road less traveled. It is the journey within. It is self-realization instead of sense gratification. I think this basic revelation of the spiritualist from any religion in the world ends up being the same. And it flies in the face of materialism, even if that materialism is wrapped in the flag of spirituality. A dharmadvaji, a flag waver, or wrapping yourself in the flag that you're a spiritualist, but then you become I'm a spiritual activist. I'm a spiritual philanthropist. And then spiritual becomes an adjective which modifies what you really are. But the world needs mere spiritualists, to steal from C.S. Lewis. It needs mere spiritualists, where that's actually who I am. I'm an active spiritualist. I'm a philanthropic spiritualist. But the core of my identity is I exist to love and commune with divinity. Part of that is opening the doors for other people to do that as well, without taking ownership of their journey, without taking credit or blame, and learning to be in this world but not of it, and see the bigger picture. Then you can actually grow old gracefully. You can let go gracefully. You can lose gracefully. You can surrender to win. You can fail to win. You can deal with the inevitable, serious curveballs life is going to throw at you, and always come out on top, because you're not playing the material game, which is guaranteed that you're going to lose and the house is going to win. I mean, take a look at Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court, I think, is like in on that right now. There's feminists just, having full-blown, crises of faith, because things they took as sacrosanct and fundamental and, a mainstay of the American politics are now being challenged by this wave of evangelism and right-wing politics. and like extreme right-wing politics and fundamentalism and Christianity infusing itself within the political process, and like the kind of like unsecularization of the states. Do you guys follow this? And people are super spun out about it. And if you're not, they think there's something wrong with you. And if you don't get as bent out of shape as they do, there's something wrong with you. And if you're not with me, you're against me. And if you're not anti-racist like I am, then you're pro-racist. You're an ally of the racists. And so your version, I think, still continues with the same fundamental materialism that Rumi was speaking out against. And it lacks the teeth and the venom of Rumi's statement. Rumi's statement is venomous. It's got teeth to it. It's violent. It's challenging. It flies in the face of so many of the myths that we live with, that we can do it. You can change the world. It doesn't mean you aren't active in this world. It does mean you don't buy into the illusion that it all hinges on you. You don't buy into that delusion of grandeur. And you realize that, like, within a couple generations, it's all going to be forgotten anyway. And the pendulum's going to swing the other way. And the stuff you accepted as, like Roe v. Wade, it's like set in stone. I'm from that generation where Roe v. Wade was set in stone. The pro-choice, the right to abortion was set in stone from my earliest memories. I was born in 72. I think Roe v. Wade was 70, if I'm not mistaken. And so it's like it was set in stone. I was raised from like the beginning of my life that is a fact. Now it's being challenged. Who knows where we're going to be in a few years? I mean, Trump could legitimately, if he doesn't, drop dead of a heart attack from eating too many Big Macs or filet of fishes or whatever he's eating every day of his life. Trump legitimately could jump back in 2024 and win the election. He probably won't run because he'll probably die upon losing because he's such a narcissistic, like child. But if he ran again in 2024, there's at least like a 50% chance. You go flip the coin, he could win. We could jump in for another term, which would then make so many Democrats like spontaneously combust. Like at least several 100,000 people would just spontaneously combust, like there. Like it would just like be much like a big ash pile where they existed. They would just like become super depressed, practically suicidal. You play that game, and you're rising and falling with the tides, and you got no control, and you're up 1 minute, you're down the next, because you're in the game, you're in the mix. Maybe I'm not all powerful, but I'm going to do everything I possibly can. If enough of us get together, then we can change. We can get that watershed moment, and we can make the world the way it's supposed to be. Make the world in God's image. The Germans were praying to Christ just as much as the English were. They were both Christians. You know what I mean? You had the Anglican Church over in England. You had the Lutheran Church over in Germany. Those two churches were like brothers in arms, sister churches. The Protestant Reformation began in Germany with Martin Luther and then worked its way over to England. And Amsterdam, the Dutch got in on it too early on. Surprised I knew that? Okay. Trying to wow the history man. So they're both on opposite sides of the battlefield in World War I and II, deploying, mustard gas on each other in World War I. It's so bad that that's what gave rise to the Geneva Conventions and the laws against chemical warfare, because these weapons of mass destruction were so violent and just horrible. But they were two Christian armies fighting each other in the name of Christ, praying every night while they deploy these awful weapons of mass destruction on one another that crept over the battlefield and sunk down the trenches and poisoned everybody. Trench warfare was just like so brutal. You look at the numbers of people who died in World War I, the numbers are just colossal. The reason why people live for longer now is because they're not dying in the first two world wars anymore. That was what brought the death rate down. It wasn't like medicine got so much better. It's just such a large percentage of the population was dying in battle that the numbers got skewed way down, like a decade and a half or something like that. At some point, the spiritualist has the realization that the material world is always going to go downhill. And if it looks like it's going up, it's a maelstrom where it's up one day and down the next. And I'm going to do my duty. And my duty might involve activism and fighting for equal rights and helping those less fortunate than myself. But I'm not going to buy into it. I'm a soul. I'm not the body. And therefore the comings and goings of this world are not ultimately the essence of what it means to be me. It's my day job. And every day of my life, I go to a deep place where I live as a soul, where I cry out Krishna's name, where I meditate, where I go to a deep place beyond space and time, where I meet the deity and I realize I am more than this body. I am more than somebody in this world. There is some greater reality I'm a part of that trumps this world a billionfold, that makes this world small and paltry, that takes away the immediacy and the urgency of this world and shows this world to be what it is, non-urgent. And what's really urgent is the possibility that I can see Krishna. And I'm going to organize my life in such a way to create that miracle. And whether I succeed or fail materially and get rich or poor or win equal rights or lose them, I'll do my duty. I'll do my duty as well as you do, but I'm detached from the whole thing. You can't sink me because I'm not on the boat. I look like I'm on the boat with all of you, but I'm not. I'm a ghost. The real me is on shore with Krishna. I'm in this world, but I'm not of it. And I refuse to concede that idea. And therefore, I live in a world beyond time. I live in a world of eternity. And therefore, crazy suffering in this world and crazy elation in this world, I don't buy into either of them. I do my duty as long as I'm here. No problem. I probably end up being more compassionate than you because I'm not like spun out by it and making friends and enemies. And like you're with us or you're against us. I can empathize with everybody. I can see everybody's point of view. But it's not as like excited. It's not as materialistic. It's not as riveted to the flesh. It's not as like everything hinges on this vote, this action, this display. I'm aloof. I'm a spiritualist. Yesterday I was trying to change the world because I was clever. Today I'm actually wise. I'm trying to change myself. And then lo and behold, those people who have changed themselves end up changing the world just by their very existence. They end up having the most influence. And what's their influence? They wake people up from the matrix. That whole Matrix movie phenomenon was the brain in a vat experiment put to film. But it works so well with our conception of reality that there is a greater reality you're a part of. And if you're living and dying in the Matrix, are you actually living and dying? If you're living and dying in a dream, if you create equal rights for all people in a dream, did you actually create equal rights for them? And if you tell materialists this, they hate you for it. They despise you because you refuse to buy into their illusion and give all importance to what they're doing, because you're not a part-time spiritualist where that's just an adjective modifying your real materialism. You're actually a full-time spiritualist, and even though you might be moving in this world, you're not of this world. You follow me, Kim? You get it? That's the resolution, because that's still got the venom in it. That's still got the teeth. That still wounds the materialist ego. That still challenges your worldview and offers you a different worldview instead of compromising in the name of spirituality. You follow that? You guys get that answer? All right, here's the verse. Yadate moha kalilam buddhir vyati tarishyati. Yada, when, te, your, buddhi, your intellect, your mind, your consciousness, vyati tarishyati, when it goes beyond, when it transcends, when it passes over moha kalilam, the pile of illusion, the forest of illusion. When your intellect, your mind, your heart, your consciousness passes beyond the forest of illusion. Tada, at that time, gantasi nirvedam, at that time you are indifferent. Shrotavyasya shrutasya cha. You're indifferent to everything that will be heard and everything which has been heard. This is a statement from early on in the Gita. When your intelligence has passed beyond the thicket of illusion, you will become indifferent to all that will be heard and all that has been heard. You see what a great sister quote that is for Rumi? The spiritualist must be indifferent to the material world because they've gone to that place beyond this world. They're in this world, but they're not of it. They know there's a bigger reality. They've touched it. They've tasted it. They've seen it. They've witnessed it. And therefore, the most unbelievable catastrophes of this material world don't shake them. They're actually better. You don't want you want your surgeons getting all spun out by the carnage. You want them to be able to surgically move without being too detached. Do their when you tag people, triage, to do their triage. Who can be treated, who can't. And just methodically move through the world of dying children and dying adults and putting tags on it and figuring out who to work on and who not to. And not taking it too seriously so they can wake up the next day and do it again. Otherwise, it's like we shall overcome and you're all hoorahing, and then when you lose, you're just all drinking yourself into oblivion. You're a fair weather friend. You're trifling. You can't be counted on. You're not solid. You're not dependable. Because the material world can sink you or elate you. You got no staying power. The spiritualist is the only person you can really count on. Because whatever happens in this material world, they're steady. They're not motivated by lust, anger, greed, gain and loss, victory and defeat, fame and infamy. They've gone to a deeper place where they do the right thing and they're touching something way more profound, and as such they become impervious to the comings and goings of this world. And whoever's in power, whoever's out of power, whatever's up, whatever's down, they're solid. Famine, feast, and everything in between. That indifference is required. It's the sign that you've gone to a deep place. And then you're compassionate to everybody. You feel for everybody. And you feel for everybody even beyond what they want you to feel for them for. They want you to feel upset for them because they lost their job. But you feel sad for them because of their delusion as well as because they lost their job. And you feel more sad about their delusion than you do about their loss of a job because you realize that delusion is going to cause them much more suffering in the future. And you see it. You see the person gilding their cage, complaining when they can't get any more gold paint to paint their cage, and being happy when they get gold paint to paint their cage, never thinking about getting out of the cage altogether. Do you guys follow that? Yesterday I was clever, tried to change the world. Today I'm wise. I'm trying to change myself. When your intellect has passed beyond the thicket of illusion and you're out of the forest and you can see it for what it is, at that time you become indifferent. What are you indifferent towards? Everything that will ever be heard. Shrotavyasya. And shrutasya cha, and everything that was heard. Also, the word shru means to hear. Shruti is our word for religious literature. It's called shruti because it's heard. It's through a process of oral reception. Oral reception. It's an oral tradition that's heard through the ear. And so this is a critique of our own sacred text too. That even the differing instructions of our sacred texts won't faze you. And it's not only the general statement about the material world, it's even a critique of our own tradition and the various sort of lower level instructions you find in our texts. And you become an essence seeker, a truth seeker, who has a very refined palate and can look at anything and see the essence of it. Do you guys follow this? All right. You want to give me some feedback? Oh, thank you, IGTV. Thank you so much for joining us. Give me some feedback.